What if I told you that Rome's richest man, a man who owned half the city, who dined with Caesar and Pompey, died not by sword but by gold? His greed drove him into the desert, where an enemy he thought weak turned his ambition into a nightmare. And in the end, molten gold was poured down his throat, making his wealth the weapon of his execution. This is the true, brutal story of Marcus Crassus. Section 1. The Fire of Ambition. Rome burned with whispers of glory. In marble halls and smoky taverns alike, men spoke of Caesar's thunderous victories in Gaul and Pompey's dominance over the seas. And then, always in a quieter voice, they mentioned a third man of power, Marcus Licinius Crassus. The richest man Rome had ever seen. Landlord of half the city. Patron of senators, owners, and debtors alike. His wealth stretched so vast that ordinary citizens joked that not a roof in Rome could be repaired without Crassus collecting his share. Yet, when poets sang of Rome's greatness, Crassus' name was never on their lips. He was a banker among conquerors. A merchant among lions. At 60, he should have been content. He had villas draped in silk, fountains spilling into marble pools, and endless banquets where noblemen bent their necks for his favor. But when he stood beside Caesar and Pompey in the Triumvirate, he felt small. Money could buy influence, yes, but it could not carve his name into eternity. One evening, after another Senate session where Pompey's admirers hailed him as Magnus, the Great, and Caesar's allies lauded him as Rome's Alexander, Crassus sat alone in his atrium. The oil lamps flickered, painting gold reflections across his bronze statues. He poured wine but did not drink. His son, Publius, tall and broad-shouldered, entered with the eager stride of youth. "Father, you seem restless." Crassus gave a thin smile. "Restless? No, my son. Merely overlooked. Tell me, when Rome sings of Caesar, what do they praise?" "His victories. His conquests," Publius answered. "And Pompey?" "His fleets, his battles." Crassus' hand tightened on the cup. "And of me? They whisper of my coin. They mock my fires." He meant the infamous way he enriched himself, buying burning houses for scraps, then sending his private fire brigade to save them. It had made him fortunes but no honor. "Father," Publius said gently, "your wealth is unmatched. None dare defy you." Crassus leaned forward, his eyes lit with an almost fevered glow. "Wealth without glory is ash. Listen, my son, the Parthian frontier awaits. A kingdom fat with riches beyond imagining. Silk, spices, silver rivers. If I march east, if I seize it, Rome will no longer call me a banker. They will call me conqueror." Publius hesitated. "And if Parthia is not so easily taken? Then I shall make it so." Crassus snapped, then softened. "This is not just for me. It is for you. For our name. For the Cassii to be remembered not as merchants, but as emperors of destiny." The room fell silent, broken only by the crackle of the oil lamps. Outside, the city still hummed with the songs of Caesar and Pompey. Crassus swore he would drown those voices in gold and blood. Section 2. The Road to War. The Senate chamber had grown wary of Crassus. When he first hinted at a campaign to the east, senators exchanged knowing glances. They had seen his hunger before. First in land, then in politics, and now in blood. A thin-voiced senator sneered. "Marcus Crassus, do you mistake yourself for Caesar? Parthia is no Gaul. Its riders are ghosts in the desert. Better men than you have been humbled by the sands." Crassus rose slowly, his toga sweeping like a curtain behind him. "Better men?" His voice was calm but cut like steel. "No man is better than one who commands the wealth of Rome. Armies march on grain and coin, and I have both in abundance. With 7 legions at my back, Parthia will fall. Their silks and gold will feed our coffers, their lands our colonies. Or are we to cower, leaving Rome's frontiers vulnerable to eastern kings?" Murmurs filled the hall. Some senators frowned, others nodded. They could not deny his logic, but they feared his pride. In the shadows of the Curia, Caesar's envoys smirked. The great general had no intention of standing in Crassus' way. Why should he? A war in the east meant fewer eyes on Gaul. Pompey, too, remained silent. Both rivals were content to let Crassus gamble his fortune and his life. Outside, as Crassus left the Senate steps, a Greek astrologer pressed through the crowd. His eyes were wide with the fever of prophecy. "Marcus Crassus!" he cried. "Beware the desert wind! Your fortune is vast, but the sands will drink it, and your thirst will never be quenched." The guards shoved the man aside. Crassus only laughed. "Let the gods speak in riddles. I trust in legions, not whispers." That night, he hosted a feast for his allies and officers. Silver platters bore roasted boar and river fish. Slaves poured endless wine. Crassus raised his cup, his voice ringing with conviction. "Rome's east is unguarded. Parthia lies soft as ripe fruit, waiting for the pluck. Tomorrow we begin preparations. I promise you this, when we return, Rome will speak not of Caesar, not of Pompey, but of Crassus, conqueror of the sunrise." A cheer rose, but not all joined. Some officers, veterans of many campaigns, exchanged uneasy glances. Parthia was no ripe fruit, it was a desert fortress, defended not by walls but by endless horizons. Publius, however, raised his own cup high. "Then let us march, father. Let Rome see our name carved into eternity." And so it was settled. The roads of Syria would soon thunder with Roman boots, and the Euphrates would bear witness to a march that would shape the fate of empires. But already, in the east, Parthian scouts had caught wind of the Romans' intent. General Serena, young yet cunning, whispered to his men beneath the desert stars. "Let him come. The desert is patient. Greed will guide him into our hands." Section 3. The Gathering Storm. Syria lay heavy with heat when Crassus arrived as governor. The streets of Antioch buzzed with merchants, soldiers, and spies. His presence, cloaked in triumphal pride, unsettled even his allies. The legions stationed there were hardy, but they were weary of eastern campaigns. They had fought Armenians, Syrians, and desert raiders. Their eyes were sun-scorched, their armor dulled. Yet Crassus demanded more men, more coin, more speed. He summoned his officers in the governor's palace, where maps of the east lay spread across polished cedar tables. "Here," Crassus declared, his fingers stabbing the parchment. "Across the Euphrates at Zeugma. From there, a straight thrust into Parthian heartlands." One officer, a grizzled veteran named Cassius Longinus, frowned. "With respect, proconsul, the Euphrates is treacherous. The Parthians know this land. They will not fight as Gauls or Germans. Their cavalry will bleed us in the open desert." Crassus' eyes narrowed. "Are you afraid of horsemen, Cassius? Rome's walls stand because of men like me, men who dared where others shrank." The officer bowed stiffly, masking his irritation. "I fear not for myself, but for the legions." Publius leaned forward eager. "Father, the men will follow if you show them glory. They remember my victories under Caesar in Gaul. Let me lead the cavalry wing. I will cut through their horsemen before they can strike." Crassus beamed at his son, pride swelling. "Yes. Together, father and son. The east will tremble." Beyond Rome's circle of ambition, warnings multiplied. Syrian allies urged caution. A Nabatean guide, lean as bone and wrapped in desert cloth, spoke plainly. "The Parthians will not meet you in open fields. They vanish, they strike, they vanish again. The desert is their fortress, the sun their ally. You will chase shadows until your men thirst for water more than for blood." Crassus dismissed him with a wave. "I have seen cities burn and kings kneel. No desert ghost will stand against 7 legions." But whispers spread among the soldiers. They remembered the omens. At the temple of Jupiter, the sacrificial entrails were found rotten. A storm had struck their camp, scattering tents and snapping standards. Some claimed the image of Mars himself had been seen weeping blood upon a statue. To the common soldier, these were signs. To Crassus, they were trifles. "Men of Rome do not bow to shadows," he told them. "The gods reward courage, not cowardice." And so, in the spring of 53 BC, The great host began its march eastward, 40,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry, and columns of light-armed auxiliaries. Their banners shimmered under the Syrian sun, promising conquest. Far across the horizon, Parthian scouts tracked every movement. Surinna, patient as the desert itself, waited. "They march heavy," he murmured, watching dust rise from Roman boots. "Let them come deeper. The sand will eat them before we lift a sword." Section 4. Crossing the Euphrates. The crossing at Zeugma began under a burning sun. The Euphrates glimmered like molten bronze, its currents tugging at the makeshift pontoon bridges Rome's engineers had laid. Thousands of soldiers pressed across, shields clattering, horses balking at the swaying planks. Crassus stood at the river's edge, his cloak pinned with gold, watching the endless line of men and equipment. Supply wagons groaned under their burdens, grain, weapons, siege engines dragged from Rome itself. He smiled. This is the weight of empire, he thought. The world bends to the will of Rome when Rome marches. Publius rode beside him, youthful confidence radiating from every movement. "Look at them, father! An army fit for Alexander himself. No king of the East could stand against such strength." Crassus clasped his son's shoulder. "And yet, it is not Alexander who leads them, but Crassus. When we return, Rome will not call me banker, but conqueror." But even as the last wagons crossed, ill omens stirred. A sudden gust tore through the camp, ripping a legionary standard from its bearer's grasp and hurling it into the river. Soldiers gasped as the eagle toppled into the current and vanished beneath the waves. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. "The gods turn their faces," one muttered. Crassus barked. "Silence! Rome's eagles cannot drown. They rise wherever Rome commands. Fetch another standard and let none speak of this again." The men obeyed, but unease lingered. That night, gathered around a campfire, several centurions debated in hushed tones. "The omens grow darker," one said, tossing a twig into the flames. "First the entrails, now the eagle. The gods send warnings." "Warnings or not," another replied, "Crassus is rich beyond imagining. He pays the donatives. Men will march for gold as much as for glory." A third leaned closer. "Gold cannot quench thirst in the desert. Have you heard the Nabatean guides? They say Parthian arrows never cease. That their horses ride as if born of wind itself." The men fell silent. In the distance, jackals howled under a sickle moon. Meanwhile, far across the plains, Surinna convened his commanders beneath the stars. He was young, not yet 30, but carried himself with the gravitas of a seasoned general. His armor gleamed with silver scales, and his black stallion pawed the sand impatiently. "They come," Surinna said, pointing east where faint fires dotted the horizon. 7 legions laden like merchants, bound for their own graves. We will not strike yet. Let them thirst, let them tire. The desert will be our ally, as it has always been." A Parthian noble asked. "And when they are weak?" Surinna smiled faintly. "Then we show them what it means to challenge the riders of Parthia. We will give them a death Rome will never forget." Section 5. Into the desert. The Roman column stretched for miles, a serpent of men and iron winding into the barren expanse of Mesopotamia. At first, the march seemed easy, flat plains, scattered villages, and water pulled from wells. Crassus rode at the head, convinced fortune smiled upon him. But the further they pressed east, the more the land changed. The soil turned to cracked clay, then to sand that swallowed the soldiers' sandals and burned beneath the midday sun. Wells ran dry. Villages vanished. What little water they found tasted brackish, fouled with silt. At night, strange lights flickered on distant ridges. Scouts reported shadows on horseback, vanishing before they could be engaged. The men muttered of spirits, of eastern phantoms. But the veterans knew better. "Parthians," they whispered. "They watch. They wait." One evening, Cassius Longinus, still uneasy, sought an audience with Crassus. The general sat in his pavilion, sipping watered wine, Publius at his side polishing his sword. "My lord," Cassius began, bowing stiffly, We are being lured. These riders are no mere raiders. They draw us deeper, away from our supplies. I urge you, fortify, wait, force them into negotiation or battle near the river where we have strength. Crassus waved him off, irritation rising. And return to Rome empty-handed? Shall I tell the Senate I feared horsemen? No, Cassius. Victory lies ahead, not behind. Victory requires patience. Cassius pressed. You risk the legions with this haste. Publius slammed his sword onto the table. Enough, Cassius. Do you think my father a fool? Did we not march with Caesar in Gaul? Did we not crush Germans who fought like wolves? These Parthians will fare no better. Cassius clenched his jaw, but bowed again. As you command, proconsul. May the gods favor us. That night, the camp was restless. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some claimed they heard hoofbeats circling in the dark. Others swore arrows had been loosed into the camp, silent, unseen, but real enough when a sentry was found dead with a shaft in his throat. By morning, more horses had gone missing. Food stores had been raided, tents slashed. The desert itself seemed to laugh at them. Crassus stood before his assembled troops, his voice booming over the clatter of shields. Do not be fooled by shadows. These raids are the tactics of cowards. Rome's destiny is not thwarted by thieves in the night. Ahead lies Parthia, rich and waiting. Forward, always forward! The men cheered, but uneasily. For every mile they marched, the desert seemed to grow larger, and the shadows more numerous. Far off, on a ridge, Serena watched with calm satisfaction. He turned to his captains. Not yet, he said softly. Let them bleed slowly. Let thirst gnaw their bellies. When the moment is right, we will strike not as shadows, but as the storm. Section 6. The Harassment. The desert stretched endless, shimmering beneath the pitiless sun. By the third week of marching, the Romans were ragged, their tunics stiff with sweat and sand. Armor scorched their shoulders, helmets burned their brows. Every step seemed to draw them deeper into a hostile void. It was then the Parthians began their game in earnest. At dawn, horns blared across the horizon. Roman sentries scrambled to formation, shields raised, eyes straining against the glare. From the dunes appeared riders, hundreds, then thousands, their armor glinting like scales of a living serpent. They circled, their horses moving as if wind carried them, dust pluming around their hooves. Arrows rained down, hissing like locusts. Roman shields studded with impacts, men cried out, horses shrieked. Yet when the legions tried to advance, the horsemen pulled away, always just beyond reach. Hold ranks! Centurions bellowed, but the barrage did not cease. Unlike Gauls or Germans, these Parthians did not waste arrows. Supply carts, carefully hidden behind dunes, rolled forward to replenish their quivers. The sky darkened again and again, a storm without end. By midday, casualties mounted. A young legionary collapsed, his shield riddled with shafts, his body bleeding from half a dozen wounds. Publius rode up to his father, his face streaked with sweat and dust. We cannot sit idle, father. Let me lead the cavalry. One charge and I'll scatter them. Crassus, lips pressed thin, shook his head. Not yet. They bait you, Publius. I know a trap when I see one. But even as he spoke, another volley rained down, striking the legionaries' packed formations. Men groaned under their shields, suffocating in the heat. Morale faltered. At last, Crassus gave the order. Advance! Push them off! The legions surged forward, shields locked, spears bristling. Dust swallowed them as they marched. But the horsemen merely retreated, loosing arrows while falling back, never allowing contact. Hours passed in this cruel dance, Romans stumbling forward, Parthians withdrawing, arrows biting flesh with every step. That night, the Roman camp was a place of misery. Fires burned low. The groans of the wounded filled the air. Men pulled arrows from their comrades' bodies with shaking hands. Supplies dwindled faster than expected, too many carts abandoned, too much water spilled. Around one fire, soldiers muttered bitterly. They fight like phantoms. Not phantoms. Demons. No, said an older veteran, staring into the flames. They are men. But men who know this land better than any Roman. And our commander. He spat into the sand. Our commander is blind with pride. The murmurs quieted as patrols passed, but the truth lingered. Doubt now sat among them like an uninvited guest. Beyond the campfires, on the far ridges, Serena and his cavalry sat in silence. The Parthian general gazed down at the Roman encampment, listening to the faint sounds of agony drifting on the wind. Tomorrow, he said calmly, we tighten the noose. Let them believe there is still hope of battle. And when they commit, when they break formation, we shall show them how swiftly the desert devours the arrogant. His men bowed, the firelight glinting off their scaled armor. In their eyes burned the patience of hunters who knew the prey was already wounded. Section 7. The Seeds of Panic. Morning came with no respite. The sun rose like a blazing coin, hammering down on weary men. The legionaries shuffled into formation, their sandals worn thin, their lips cracked from thirst. As the trumpets called, the soldiers lifted their shields with a groan that sounded less like readiness and more like resignation. The Parthians were waiting. Again their riders appeared on the horizon, horns blaring, drums thundering. Again the arrows fell, endless, merciless. This time the Romans did not advance. They huddled together, shields overlapping, crouched in silence as death hissed from the sky. Cowards! Publius shouted, spurring his horse down the line. His voice cracked with fury. Are you Romans or children? Stand and fight! A centurion growled back. Fight what, sir? Shadows? You cannot strike the wind! Publius reined in, his young face taut with frustration. He turned to his father, who sat grim-faced on horseback, eyes narrowed against the sun. Father, Publius pleaded, we waste away here. Give me the cavalry. I'll crush them in one charge. Crassus' hand tightened on his reins. He could feel the weight of every gaze on him, the officers, the men, even his son. To refuse made him seem weak. To agree risked disaster. At last he spoke. Not yet. Their tricks cannot last forever. When they falter, then we strike. But even as he spoke, another hail of arrows clattered onto the shields, driving men to their knees. The desert echoed with screams. By evening, discipline frayed. Water rations dwindled. Men cursed openly, muttering that their commander had led them to slaughter. A group of legionaries gathered near a tent, voices low but urgent. This is madness. One spat. We march deeper into a trap, and he sees nothing. Another whispered. Better to desert than to die like animals. If we turn west, perhaps we can reach the river. Desertion is death, growled a centurion who overheard. But so is staying. The words hung heavy, bitter as the air itself. Inside his pavilion, Crassus paced. The map before him was stained with sweat and sand. Cassius Longinus entered, his face lined with exhaustion. My lord, the men are crumbling. We must retreat to Carrhae, regroup, find water, food, anything. If we press further, we will be slaughtered without ever seeing their city walls. Crassus slammed his fist onto the table. Do you think me blind, Cassius? If we turn back now, Rome will mock me. Caesar and Pompey will laugh in their villas, calling me a coward. No, forward. Always forward. Cassius' eyes flashed with fury. Better to live dishonored than to die damned. Leave me, Crassus barked. Cassius bowed stiffly, then stormed out. Later, alone with his son, Crassus' mask slipped. His voice trembled, almost a whisper. I cannot fail, Publius. Do you understand? All my life I have been second, wealthy, yes, but never glorious. If I die in Rome, they will say I was a banker who fancied himself a soldier. But if I win here, he gripped Publius' hand, then they must remember me. Publius nodded, his jaws set. Then let us win, father. Tomorrow, give me the cavalry. Let me prove us worthy of remembrance. Crassus stared into the dark, torn between dread and desire. He had seen the omens, heard the warnings. Yet pride still whispered louder. And somewhere beyond the dunes, Surina smiled. His prey was growing desperate. The trap was nearly sprung. Section 8, Publius' Charge. Dawn bled across the desert like spilled wine. The Romans assembled once more, their armor dulled, their faces hollow from thirst. The Parthians appeared in their endless circling dance, horns blaring, arrows raining. The same torment, repeated like a curse. But this time, Crassus broke. He turned to Publius, whose young eyes burned with hunger for action. "Take the cavalry. Break their circle. Drive them off." Publius' face lit with grim determination. At last! He saluted his father, then wheeled his horse to rally the men. "Romans! With me! Today we carve through these cowards and show them the steel of Rome!" A roar rose from the cavalry as 4,000 horsemen thundered out from the Roman line. Dust clouded the sky. The ground trembled beneath hooves. For a heartbeat, it seemed Publius' charge might shatter the Parthian illusion. But Surina had planned for this moment. The armored cataphracts braced their lances, a living wall of steel. Behind them, horse archers swarmed like hornets, releasing volley after volley into the charging Romans. Publius' men slammed into the cataphracts, their momentum breaking on that iron tide. Horses screamed, men toppled, lances splintered. "Hold!" Publius shouted, but already his wings were folding inward. The horse archers encircled them, arrows falling like rain. Panic spread. Roman cavalrymen fought desperately, blades hacking, but for every Parthian slain, 10 more arrows flew. The desert rang with chaos, metal, hoofbeats, death. Publius fought like a lion. His sword cut through a cataphract's armor, his shield caught an arrow meant for his heart. But the circle closed tighter. His men fell in heaps around him. At last, an arrow pierced his thigh. Another struck his shoulder. Blood poured down his armor as he staggered in the saddle. His standard-bearer tried to shield him, only to be cut down by a lance. Surrounded, his body broken, Publius looked skyward. Perhaps he saw Rome. Perhaps he saw only sand. He drove his own sword into his chest before the enemy could take him alive. The Parthians cheered, severed his head, and mounted it on a spear. With cruel delight, they paraded it before the Roman lines, where Crassus watched in horror. His son's face, proud even in death, bobbed above the enemy ranks like a grotesque trophy. The army shuddered. The proud eagle of Rome seemed to fold its wings. Section 9, The Golden Death. From that moment, the Romans broke. Discipline collapsed as terror spread. The legions tried to retreat toward Carrhae, but the Parthian arrows never ceased. Men dropped their shields, stumbled, and fell. The desert swallowed them. By the time the survivors reached the city walls, half the army was gone. The once mighty host was now a ragged mob of bleeding, starving men. Crassus, hollow-eyed, tried to rally them. "We will regroup, we will endure." But his words rang hollow. His men no longer believed. It was then that Surina sent envoys under a white flag. They spoke with honeyed tongues. "Our king does not wish endless slaughter. Meet us. Speak of peace. End this bloodshed." Crassus' officers begged him not to go. Cassius Longinus seized his arm. "It is a trick. They will kill you the moment you step outside the gates." But Crassus, broken by grief, still clung to dignity. "If I can save what remains of my army, I must." He rode out with his retinue, unarmed, into the no-man's land between camps. Surina awaited him, resplendent in scale armor, his horse draped in silk. For a moment, there was calm. Words exchanged. Nods given. But then chaos. Voices rose, weapons flashed, and the parley erupted into violence. Crassus was seized, bound, dragged into the Parthian camp. There, Surina made his judgment. "This man came for gold, and for gold he shall die." They heated it in a great crucible until it boiled like the sun itself. Roman prisoners were forced to watch as soldiers pinned Crassus to his knees. His mouth was pried open, his cries stifled by iron grips. The molten metal poured. It seared his tongue, throat, lungs, turning the voice that once demanded conquest into a scream drowned by fire. His body convulsed, then fell still, smoke rising from within. The Parthians laughed, declaring, "Let all Rome see the fate of those who worship gold." His head was severed and sent east, to be mocked in theaters and courts, a prop in tales of arrogance undone. In Rome, news of the disaster spread like plague. The richest man in the Republic was dead, his army shattered, his legacy reduced to ashes. The triumvirate crumbled, Caesar and Pompey turned on one another, and civil war tore Rome apart. And yet, across the centuries, one truth remained: Marcus Crassus, who craved glory beyond wealth, found his name etched into eternity not as conqueror, but as a warning. The molten gold still whispers through history, of ambition without wisdom, greed without measure, and the desert that devours all who march too proudly into its grasp.